With consumer demand for anytime, anywhere video growing, on-demand and live video streaming is now pretty much commonplace. Many of the video distributors out there already turn to CDNs for streaming in order to ensure a high-quality, reliable viewing experience. However, there are a lot of questions that remain about the cloud. Specifically, where is video ultimately going to be prepared and where is it going to be stored? Whether that's in the cloud, on-premise, or hybrid models are still up to a lot of debate. Operating in the cloud is nothing new to many industries, but for the video industry, it's still a relatively recent phenomenon. Video, especially TV, is used to being on an island. It's an industry unlike any other with its own specialized equipment, unique processes, and technology skill sets. But as video delivery has become more IP-centric, it has also become more IT-centric, and we've seen how certain operations can be converged and mitigated into the cloud. In this session, we're going to look at on-demand workflows for services in the cloud for managing, storing, and processing professional video. We're going to look at what are the business drivers behind companies using cloud services, the unique requirements for delivering media cloud services, and whether or not the cloud is really living up to its hype. Part of the challenge we face when we talk about the cloud is that there really isn't a standard definition for what a cloud service is. To illustrate, there's a common definition going around today that we can use as an example. Cloud technology is the abstraction of software from the underlying virtualized architecture where the architecture can be rapidly provisioned and deployed. Yeah, I think you see where I'm going with this one. And that's really the problem. The definition of the cloud has often become so overladen with technical jargon that they miss the plot. So for our purposes, we're going to simplify things a little bit. We're going to focus on a few key characteristics of what a cloud technology should entail, such as usage-based payment, browser-based access, and pervasive access and elasticity. For this presentation, cloud should be considered as an elastic infrastructure. With the cloud, it should be possible to rapidly provision additional infrastructure or services, meaning new services can be deployed quickly, they can be flexible, and they can minimize the capital expenditure. So now that we have a common definition for the cloud, let's take a look at what are the trends for cloud-based media services. Unfortunately, there really isn't a lot of data to help us on this topic or allow us to speak on this topic with much confidence. One of the best pieces of information out there actually comes from Devoncroft's 2016 annual report, which indicates that moving operational activity to the cloud is now firmly in the top 5 key technology trends for media companies. Overm predicts that cloud media services market will be worth $578 million in 2018. This figure is quite useful as it excludes the value of companies buying pure compute. Equally, the figure excludes activity from broadcast technology vendors who are providing access technology in the cloud. At Akamai, we've seen the trend ourselves. Over the last year, we've seen 115% year-over-year growth in our workflow capabilities. The majority of that growth is attributed directly to professional video. Recently, however, we have seen a number of new use cases appearing, such as virtual reality, companies testing 4K, and many delivering linear TV channels online. Now, no matter what you think about the market projections or where you think where the market's going, there are a few key trends that all of us can agree on. 1. The audience is changing their viewing habits. This is a fact. We can debate about the rate of change and the reasons, but things are changing. In the US, over 50% of households now use an online streaming service. In Europe, OTC services being delivered by broadcasters and native OTT channels now account upwards of 15% of all viewing. 2. To support these new business realities, we need to dramatically decrease the time to revenue for technology deployments in the future. 3. As such, media companies want to move towards a virtualized infrastructure in order to capture opportunity when it presents itself. The problem we face is the traditional media technology value chain just doesn't support the transition the industry needs to make. This diagram does a great job of summing up the current situation. Right now, we have a number of different pieces in the value chain, all of which are loosely coupled at best. Typically, they don't share the same common technology, they don't share the same standards, and they very often don't share the same processes. Even in areas that operate in the same part of the value chain, such as online delivery, we will use different standards and different formats. This makes our world extremely difficult to manage at best, and oftentimes costly and completely inefficient. This situation is just untenable, and that's why companies are starting to look to the cloud. With that in mind, the most pressing question is, why? Why are companies looking to the cloud, and what types of problems are companies really trying to address by making this move? Needless to say that there are many drivers, but there are really 4 critical business issues that people are going to look at. 1. We want to reduce the reliance on capital investment. The nature of managing media means we are historically used to paying for capital up front. We purchase hardware and software, and we depreciate that hardware and software over a number of years. This approach in many parts of the video value chain is untenable going forward. IDC believes that a video service provider can reduce its CapEx expenditure by 20 to 30% when moving to the cloud. 2. Gain access to services that scale up and down as needed. Now, part related to point 1, companies want to be able to access services more efficiently, and they want those services to scale seamlessly. We are in an incredibly disruptive period. Inaction is now a dangerous activity for many media companies. Permanent innovation, or the ability to deploy new services in hours or days, is incredibly important. Media companies want technology to help improve that top line. They have to introduce new services more rapidly and at a much lower cost than they have in the past. 3. They need to plug resource and skill gaps where they exist. As new projects appear and disappear, specific skill sets like transcoding or IT are not always available and easy to quickly mobilize. Many media companies look to cloud service providers to bolster their in-house skill set so that their organizations can grow at the speed of media. 4. Video services want to focus on their core competency. As the competitive pressure for media companies to acquire new rights, reach new platforms, invest into new technologies such as 4K, something has to give. As such, many companies are starting to look at what technology is core to their business versus what's non-essential. What is going to make a material difference to our business versus something they can outsource? Cloud services are seen as an ideal way to divest more commoditized activities so that the media companies can focus on their core business, which is creating content. So, in order to evaluate the success of the cloud, we need to make sure that all of these business challenges are satisfied. These challenges are not too dissimilar to what we see in the enterprise environment. It's just that working with video is a lot harder and requires a lot more specialized thinking. As such, customers are looking for expertise in their providers as well as looking at the technology being supplied. Now that we've got a better understanding of why cloud services are being considered, let's spend some time working through the key attributes media companies really should look at when evaluating different vendors. Again, the attributes are quite diverse. Certain features are going to be more relevant for other companies, but from our discussion with a wide variety of customers, here are the things that have really come through. One key attribute to evaluate is the range of services being offered. Now, many media companies recognize that working in the cloud can be complex, especially if their workflow is split across different providers. The challenge of moving large mezzanine media files around prevents this from being easy. Many companies, therefore, either limit purchasing to distinct services such as encoding or transcoding, or look for providers that can offer a range of services within a particular workflow, such as storage, transcoding, digital rights management, etc. This factor is often the case with live workflows, where the complexity of working across multiple service providers adds unnecessary stress. As such, companies want to select a vendor in deployment that provides a wide range of services to reduce complexity. The next key attribute is experience and stability. This stands to reason. Buyers of the cloud will often look for companies that have a pedigree in delivering cloud services. Next, security. This goes without saying. Buyers of cloud services put a significant amount of emphasis on the security procedures used by suppliers and their adherence to recognized standards. Service and resilience. Working with digital media assets is not easy at the best of times. Publishing deadlines, restricted rights windows, breaking news all require vendors to be available when things go wrong, and a strong service culture is essential. Next, format support. While we're seeing some level of standardization creeping into the multi-screen workflow, especially with the recent announcements of common media application format, the fact still remains that managing and processing media is complex and will remain complex. The next battle could be around the TV user experience, and then maybe the way entertainment blends with the Internet of Things. The truth is that nobody knows what the next big value add will be 5 years from now, which is why many have to be ready for anything. Delivering a multi-screen video proposition means handling complex video formats, usually across multiple workflows, geographical boundaries, and commercial partners. As such, customers will examine the extent of the format support for the potential supplier. Can the cloud service output new formats such as CMAF? Can the service manage caption-related outputs, such as 608, 708, and sidecar formats? And finally, what kind of DRM does the provider support? APIs are by far the most popular method of using cloud services. Customers therefore need good quality documentation, a robust API set that is easy to integrate into any content management system or any third-party system they may be running. And then finally, quality and performance. Quality is a given, but performance is also key. Speed can dramatically impact a customer's workflow, especially where a fast turnaround time is required or where rights dictate certain deadlines. With the groundwork laid for why companies are looking to the cloud and what attributes should be considered when evaluating a vendor, we also need to take a look at the types of cloud deployments available to customers before we can begin ranking them. Like we've seen in other areas, there are a diverse range of deployment methodologies that we all need to evaluate, but there are three that we're really going to focus on. The first is do it yourself in the cloud. In this model, enterprises lease compute facilities from companies like Rackspace, Amazon, Google, Microsoft Azure, etc. They then purchase third-party software that is installed within the cloud infrastructure and then manage the service themselves. Pricing is typically based on the compute that you use as well as the software that you paid. The benefit to this approach is having compute resources available when you need them. The downside is needing enough resources within your own team to install, manage, run, and deploy the software. The second model is platform as a service. In this model, customers reserve and pay for specified resources. Now, typically this is a technical outcome such as transcoding or storage, and they buy this from a vendor who will use their own software, but often don't manage the network the software is running on. Customers upload the content to the provider who performs the certain function. Pricing is typically based on a commitment fee, as well as encoding speed or file type. In the final model, function X as a service, the service provider not only provides the software, but they also manage the network that the software is running on. A customer typically uploads or ingests the asset, the service provider performs the function and delivers an outcome based on their service description, often with an SLA. Pricing is typically based on a pay-as-you-go model, sometimes with commitments, and then a range of variables such as the speed of the transcoding, the number of formats, or the number of bit rates that the customer would like. Services like this should be simple, easy to use, and are usually very cost effective. So, with all this in mind, let's go back and evaluate the different approaches against the key criteria we previously outlined. Let's start by looking at DIY. The real benefit to this approach is having compute resources dedicated to your business on a pay-as-you-go basis. This approach provides some relief from CapEx by reducing the need to purchase hardware or workflow storage up front. Operational teams can spin up servers very quickly to test new services or software that they need as they need them. You choose what range of service you want to run on a compute platform and manage the implementation yourselves. The downside to this approach is that you are not entirely free from the operational burden, as you still need enough people, power, management, and software to run the services. Hence the reason it scores very low on capital, scaling, and resources. DIY doesn't quite achieve all the business objectives that we've identified, but it does allow for full control under certain use cases. Companies can choose what technology is core and what isn't and manage accordingly. With the platform as a service model, the key advantage is that resources are generally pre-allocated and therefore typically available when you need them. It requires less resource to manage than DIY, but is typically much harder to scale, as the provider, someone who may come from a hardware or software background and not used to scaling networks, will ultimately be required to manage the network on your behalf. Customers can control the workflow from a single common interface, i.e. using both on-premise or off-premise hardware, which adds flexibility. That said, the very nature of these services, they are typically more expensive to buy and obviously limited to the functionality of the vendor. The real disadvantage, however, is the inability to scale to handle peak and unexpected demands, especially across multiple customers. Customers will also need to manage elements of the workflow not delivered by the vendor on their own. As such, this model would work well if you have access to short-term overflow services reserved in advance. In the final model, X as a service, the provider performs a function and delivers an outcome based on the service description. There are typically no capital requirements or resources required by a customer, and as such, this model gets the highest marks in our capital requirements category. These services are generally better at scaling than platform as a service because the provider manages both the network and the capacity. Cloud-based service providers make services like video transcoding become an operational expense that you incur rather than a CapEx expense. So, should your workload suddenly increase or you need to burst, the cloud will scale to handle it. So on the face of it, X as a service model, though not perfect, provides the best option for meeting our key business objectives. This only provides part of the picture, however. As we've identified previously, there are a range of other considerations that need to be taken into account when looking at cloud services before they can offer any value to the business, and it's here that we start to see some very interesting results. A DIY solution provides great flexibility if you want to deploy a wide range of services, assuming you are willing to piece everything together on your own. As long as the software you purchase is capable of being deployed in the cloud, then the only real limitations are the capabilities of the software and the capabilities of your technical team. Performance also scores very well, since adding capacity can sometimes be as simple as purchasing more compute. The real challenge with the DIY approach is based on having resources and experience required to continue managing your service. Services will scale, but it does require a skilled resource to manage the implementation. In the end, we believe DIY works very well with companies who want to test and evaluate new services, but may not be the right solution if your ultimate business goal is to remove complexity and cost from your model. Platform as a service providers don't score as well on range of services front, as the capabilities they provide are typically limited to the vendor's core competency. For example, a company like Telestream, who provides a very full feature set for transcoding, isn't going to provide CMS capabilities, ad insertion capabilities, and things of that nature. So these services are generally designed to be secure. However, the performance score is a bit lower due to the need to pre-allocate compute resources, which makes them a little less elastic compared to DIY solutions. Media vendors also need to ensure that their APIs are well documented and well supported for the service. But moving servers or process to the cloud is not really the cloud, and we find a number of shortcomings in this approach. We often find that the experience of the vendors that they have is based in a hardware background, which is really not the same as deploying a network. This is often demonstrated in the way that their services are constructed. For example, many transcoding solutions are often the platform as a service model will have a system for mapping a single job to a single transcoding file. If the server fails, the transcoding job fails. There is no concept of spreading the job across multiple servers or maintaining state across those servers so that you can quickly pick up the job and reprocess that job again. In our opinion, these services are ideal for media companies that have consistent volume requirements and want to use a particular vendor software, but do not want to invest in the hardware required to run the service. In the final model, X as a service, providers perform very well across most of the key metrics. Providers are often experienced in delivering cloud services and gear the capabilities to be resilient, high-performing, and secure. The challenge, and this is a function of their business model, is the range of services they can provide. Many as-a-service providers focus on a particular part of the value chain, such as online delivery, storage, or transcoding. These distinct services can be scaled and delivered with market-leading performance. As with the vendor model, if a service provider doesn't own the underlying hardware and compute and power, then the customer won't have dedicated resources, and as such, scaling quickly can be an issue. These services work well for companies that didn't want to perform a particular task, such as an online content processing, and want a third party to manage the entire process. Due to the near instant provisioning and pay-as-you-go pricing, as-a-service providers can really help their customers launch new media services or scale up existing services quickly and easily. So, when you look at each of these different methodologies, we can see all of the methodologies come with certain positives and negatives. Each are better suited to dealing with one particular use case or the other. However, when you look at the business objectives and the key attributes, the X as a service scored the highest in our analysis. So, on the face of it, working in the cloud can provide answers to a number of business challenges being faced today. But is it really that easy? Are there other challenges associated with working in the cloud? The first challenge we see, regardless of whatever option you choose for deploying in the cloud, is what we like to call the cloud silo. So cloud workflows being delivered across different providers can by their very nature create silos of activities, which places undue pressure on the customer. As contents move in and out of each silo, the customer not only has to cover the cost of moving the files between each of these systems, but they also have to pay to cover the operational cost of filling the gaps to make sure that everything works cohesively. This becomes a major problem as the market moves to 4K and larger file distribution. Having storage, preparation, and delivery being delivered by a single provider, as an example, can help reduce the friction in the workflow and simplify operations significantly. The second challenge can be seen when the content libraries need to be updated or reprocessed. First, customers must encounter the upload penalty to put mezzanine files back into the cloud, which can be costly and time-consuming, especially when we're moving large video files. Once in the cloud, the second striking point becomes evident: the download penalty. The download penalty is incurred because most cloud providers charge a significant amount of money to download the files once they've been in the cloud. These two penalties can also cause real problems when simple changes need to be made to the content library. For example, let's say you need to add subtitles, a new bitrate, or you want to upgrade your library to support a new format such as CMAF. One way to mitigate this problem is to choose a cloud provider with services that are co-located with storage so that you don't need to constantly upload media files every time a new format comes to market. Working in the cloud isn't an easy option for media customers, especially in a world where tight turnaround times, complex workflows, and difficult SLAs are prevalent. Media companies need to consider suppliers very carefully. With over 15 years of experience delivering cloud services, the team at Akamai believe that the real business benefits from cloud services can only be realized by developing services that are natively born in the cloud, rather than adapting products that kind of sort of work. We believe that cloud providers need to offer easy access, ultimate scale, flexibility, while being secure, no matter what the model. By offering their complete range of modular capabilities, from processing, protection, and storage, through delivery, all of which integrate seamlessly into our customers' value chain, we can re-envision services so that they can operate at hyperscale, hyper-reliability, and hyper-consistency, all integrated tightly into the modern supply chain. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our presentation. I'd like to thank you all for taking your time to listen and look forward to speaking with you in the future.